Let's talk to Guy, Ms Campbell, director at JL Partners. They did a poll just the other day in which they showed a nationally representative sample of British adults a picture of Rupert Lowe and asked them to identify him. And you might not be surprised to know that the Nigel Farage and Reform are pushing this as a bit of a wake-up call to Rupert Lowe. 86% of the public didn't recognise him at all. 71% of Reform voters didn't know who he was. Now, you might say that doesn't sound right to you because you know who he is, but would you recognise him in the street? Let's talk to Guy. Guy, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Were you surprised by the findings of this poll?
Not particularly, to be honest. I think Westminster will often get very, very fixated on the stories of the day, but it's very easy to forget just quite how little the average person pays attention to the news and the play-by-play and the who's in and the who's out. I think about 25 to 30% of people can name their MP, let alone an MP from another party. And name recognition is very low. It takes a long time to build up a brand and to build up knowledge of who you are, no matter how good and how impressive you are as an MP. And so this story would need to run a lot longer, and I think Rupert would need to have been established a lot more to have a higher level of recognition. I think the one figure that did surprise me was only 29% of Reform voters knowing who he was. I think that's the bit that's really surprising.
Yes, I think so. Because I seem to remember, I think it was shortly before the election even, maybe 2 months or so before the election, that a lot of people didn't recognise Keir Starmer when they were shown a picture of him.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think, really it's only the Prime Minister and senior members of the Cabinet who have high levels of recognition. When you're in opposition, it's very, very hard to break through and to get people to pay attention to you. And when you're a party that, no matter how high its level of support is at the moment, it's still a party with 5 MPs and viewed as a minor party.
Yeah.
Very, very hard to get recognition just as that party, let alone as a specific MP within that party.
So in your view, would you say that this story will sort of come and go, and regardless of how it ends up, if Rupert Lowe ends up leaving Reform or staying with Reform, in the public's mind, it won't really make an awful lot of difference?
So I think there's a difference between whether or not there's a specific profile that one MP has and the wider perception that a party is disunited or it's fighting amongst itself. So, when the Conservatives had a steady string of resignations, nobody knew who a lot of those ministers were. Junior minister in Department X has resigned.
Right.
The sense of conflict, the sense of confusion, the sense of not being professional and organised, fighting amongst themselves, that's something that could stick. But I think the point here really is that Rupert Lowe, no matter how impressive he is as an MP, and he's been very impressive so far, doesn't necessarily have the stature to keep that fight going on and on and on.
Yeah, I think that is going to be the issue, isn't it? And that is always going to be the issue with what is regarded as, I mean, one of the things that they disagree about, of course, is that Rupert Lowe calls Reform a protest party. And I think in some ways he's right to say that. Nigel Farage, of course, denies it and says, no, we're not a protest party. We're building up to become the government and the party of government. But at the moment, they still kind of look like a protest party, don't they?
I think, historically, yes, but there's no way to look at a party that is in the top 3 polls, leading in the polls, that is forecast to have probably over 100 seats in the next election if they carry on, and say that they will be a protest party then.
Yeah.
They'll be a serious party, potentially the second or third. Nigel Farage obviously has ambitions to go all of the way. And so I think part of the question here is about how they can transition from being a party of 10% of the population, 15% of the population to a 20-25, and to do that you need to be unified, you need to be marching in the same direction, but you also need to recognise that the main asset and the thing holding that together is Nigel Farage, one of the MPs with the highest name recognition of any political figure. And yes, lots of people don't like him, but also there are a lot of people who do like him.
Yeah, and the ones who do like him are very, very sort of avid about it, aren't they?
Exactly, and I mean, you could see that in the last election. The one thing the Conservatives didn't want was Nigel Farage to return and campaign. And when he did, that changed the entirety of the election, and it catapulted Reform from maybe 1 to 2 seats to 5 seats, and to second place in a whole swathe of the country.
Yeah. Absolutely right. Good to talk to you. Thanks, Guy. Thank you very much indeed. Guy Ms. Campbell, the director of JL Partners, with some interesting updates on the whole situation regarding reform. Not much news coming out on that front today. Nothing from Nigel Farage. Again, I said this yesterday, we've asked him to come on the show. We've also asked Rupert Lowe to come on the show. So far, neither one of them has agreed a time or a place where they want to do that. That may change. We may get them on tomorrow. We shall see.